distinguished participants as well as excellencies who are there in the panel. Uh, it is a great privilege for us because there are more than 400 participants who have registered today for this event online. This event is being organized on two platforms. One is this MS Team for the distinguished panel, honorable ministers, etc. And there is live streaming on the YouTube. Before we start, I would like to draw attention of everybody for some of the administrative and logistics arrangement. May I request everybody to at least put their mobiles on a silent mode. The second is also to keep your voice microphone on mute. And other than the honorable panel, may I request everybody else to also switch off the camera. For the question answer session in both the platforms, whether it is YouTube or MS Team, we would encourage you to put your questions on the chat box, and Dr. Nagesh Kumar, who will moderate the question and answer session, will take your questions accordingly and take it to the panel. Parallelly, if you intend to take on the floor, there is a raise the hand symbol on MS Team, so you can click that and we will take care of opportunity to give you the floor. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it gives us a great pleasure to invite Her Excellency Ms. Ibu Armida Salsia Alice Jahbana, Under Secretary General of the United Nations and Executive Secretary of ESCAP, to chair this high-level policy dialogue on COVID-19 and South Asia, socio-economic impacts, national strategies, and sub-regional cooperation for building back better. May I request Ibu Armida to chair the session and give her opening remarks and then follow up with the proceedings of the meeting. Ibu, welcome. The floor is yours.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Nagesh. Excellencies, a very good afternoon to all of you. May I greet all of you by one. Again, our appreciation for all of you for taking the time to join us in this high-level policy dialogue. Excellency Mr. Esalaruan Wirakun, Secretary General of SAARC. Excellency Mr. Shahidul Islam, Secretary General of BIMSTEC. Dr. Mustafa Mastur, Minister of Economy, Government of Afghanistan. Mr. Excellency Mr. Muhammad Abdul Manan, Minister of Planning, Government of Bangladesh. Excellency Mr. Leonpo Loknak Sharma, Minister of Economic Affairs, Bhutan. Excellency Dr. Rajiv Kumar, Vice Chairman Niti Aayog, India. Excellency Mr. Muhammad Aslam, Minister of National Planning, Housing and Infrastructure, Maldives. Excellency Professor Puspa Rajkadev, Vice Chairman, National Planning Commission, Nepal. Excellency Dr. Shabnum Sarfraz from the Planning Commission, Pakistan. Dr. Sugat Yalegama, DG Sustainable Development Council, Sri Lanka. Colleagues in the UN family, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen. It gives me immense pleasure to welcome all of you at this virtual high-level policy dialogue, which is being organized by our office, the South-Southwest Asia office in Delhi. So this discussion is very timely, as your excellencies know that we are now in the midst of this high-level political forum convened in New York, in which 3 South Asian countries, namely Bangladesh, Nepal, and India, are presenting or will be presenting their second VNRs on Monday next week. So again, very timely, as well as again our concern, this COVID-19 at its huge socio-economic impact, not to mention the health impact. Secretary General Guterres has launched the Shared Responsibility Global Solidarity Report and the UN framework for immediate socio-economic response to COVID-19 for a coordinated, coherent policy response to the COVID-19, and the immediate response is certainly at the country level. Yes, so therefore our colleagues, RCs, are also attending, and we are in close coordination and consultation with our RC colleagues. At the regional level, ESCAP, as a regional commission, is coordinating with our colleagues at the regional level UN efforts, again from our office here in Bangkok. With regard to our socio-economic framework, or ESCAP socio-economic framework, there are several elements that are the focus of our framework. First, foremost is protecting and investing in people that are most impacted by this COVID-19, and also how to enhance the resilience now as well as to future pandemic and crisis. Second is supporting sustainable and inclusive economic recovery. So therefore, this fiscal as well as monetary stimuli is very important. How, again, to target them, as well as how to finance this fiscal stimulus. Restoring supply chain and supporting small and medium enterprises, including SMEs, which are owned by women, that are also hugely impacted by the crisis. The principle of building back better. Again, more medium, longer term recovery, in which the three pillars of sustainable development, the economic, social, as well as the environment pillar, which basically, we would like to recover better, not to the old situation, the pre-COVID-19. In South Asia, as we know that the sub-region with nearly 1.8 billion people, 25% of the world population, but then the development challenges are still immense, despite, of course, a lot of progress pre-COVID, but then we would like to hear from you what the impact and how, the response, and how we can also support, a better response and to recover better. And for this, Nagesh Kumar, as the director of our office in Delhi, will present the policy paper, again with valuable inputs from all UN system and other stakeholders, especially highlighting the issues, challenges, as well as way forward for 8 member states, the countries in South Asia. So the paper aims to provide analysis which basically identify level of preparedness with several key indicators, not only health, but connectivity, physical space, and then the government policy response to mitigate the impact, as well as the need for forging sub-regional as well as regional cooperation. And the role and how the role of UN, including UN ESCAP. So I look forward again to listening to your views, especially on the policy response and how we could, recover better. So with that, may I invite, so the way the agenda is, I would then invite the Secretary General of SAARC, and then followed by the Secretary General of BIMSTEC, and then I would like also to invite Excellencies, to make your presentation in turn. May I now invite His Excellency, Mr. Esala Ruan Wirakon, Secretary General of SAARC, for his opening remarks. Excellency, the floor is yours.
Chair, Her Excellency Amida Alice Jabana, Executive Secretary of UN ESCAP, Honorable Ministers, Honorable Vice Chairs of the National Planning Commissions, Secretary General of BIMSTEC, His Excellency Shahidul Islam, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. It gives me immense pleasure to be able to join this important policy dialogue. I thank UNESCAP for convening this policy dialogue on COVID-19 and South Asia. This policy dialogue is very timely and relevant to all the countries of South Asia. I wish to duly acknowledge the distinguished presence of the Honorable Ministers and the Honorable Vice Chairs of the National Planning Commissions in this policy dialogue. We look forward to benefiting from their remarks. Excellencies, the COVID-19 pandemic has left an unprecedented socio-economic impact globally, and South Asia is no exception. The current crisis has triggered the need for immediate regional action to combat the health emergency caused by the pandemic in order to mitigate its adverse socio-economic impacts. As you are aware, all the SAARC leaders responded to the call of the Honorable Prime Minister of India and had a video conference to combat the global COVID-19 pandemic as early as on 15th March 2020. As an immediate response in combating the pandemic, the SAARC leaders created a SAARC COVID-19 Emergency Fund. As a follow-up to the SAARC leaders' video conference, the SAARC Health Ministers' video conference was held on 23rd April 2020. Senior health officials from the SAARC countries have also met virtually in March this year. The interim unit of the SAARC Disaster Management Center has set up a COVID-19 portal with daily coronavirus-related updates from the South Asian countries. These initiatives augur well for strengthened regional collaboration under the auspices of SAARC. In addition to these initiatives in the health sector, several studies have indicated that the South Asian countries need to take urgent measures to promote deeper regional economic integration in COVID-19 recovery. In order to carry forward this objective, a virtual meeting of SAARC trade officials was held in early April. It is apparent that beyond the emergency responses that are in place, there is a need to pursue regional collaboration effectively as a long-term sustainable development strategy in mitigating the after effects of the pandemic. In conclusion, I wish to once again thank UNESCAP for organizing this policy dialogue. UNESCAP has been an active and valuable partner of SAARC since the signing of the MOU in 1994. We look forward to working closely with UNESCAP in our fight against the global pandemic and on matters of mutual interest. I wish this policy dialogue great success. Thank you.
Thank you, His Excellency, Mr. Wirakun, for your views. Next, I would like to invite His Excellency, Mr. Shahidul Islam, Secretary General of BIMSTEC, to share his thoughts. Over to you, His Excellency.
Thank you very much. Our Excellency Under Secretary General of United Nations and Executive Secretary of UNESCAP and also Chair of today's webinar, Honorable Ministers and high-level representatives from Afghanistan, Bangladesh, Bhutan, India, Maldives, Nepal, Pakistan, and Sri Lanka. Secretary General of SAARC, Director UNESCAP Sub-Regional Office for South and Southwest Asia. Good afternoon. It is a great privilege for me to join today's high-level policy dialogue. To begin with, let me express my deep appreciation to UNESCAP for organizing this event and bringing together so many dignitaries to speak. The COVID-19 pandemic has brought unprecedented challenges to BIMSTEC and South Asian countries. While the pandemic was initially a health crisis, it has turned into an economic crisis by seriously disrupting trade, travel, remittances, and domestic economic activities. Millions of workers engaged in the informal sector have lost their livelihoods. The returning migrant workers have created further pressure on the domestic labor market. The recent success of South Asian countries in poverty reduction is being eroded as millions of people have lost their daily income. South Asian governments are forcefully responding to these challenges by strengthening health system, providing income support for the poor, and offering incentive packages to the businesses. However, if the pandemic prolongs, it will be difficult for the national governments alone to cope with the situation with their limited resources. Given the cross-border nature of the crisis, regional and international organizations will have to come forward to tackle the post-COVID-19 recovery and rehabilitation. The BIMSTEC, the organization I represent, brings together 5 countries of South Asia and 2 countries of Southeast Asia. BIMSTEC has 2 broad mandates. The first mandate is to strengthen economic, physical, and people-to-people connectivity within the region. The second mandate is to promote common actions to address vulnerabilities, including poverty, terrorism, and transnational crime, energy security, food security, climate change, natural disaster, and public health. I believe that these 2 mandates will remain equally valid and relevant in the post-COVID recovery and rehabilitation. The COVID-19 pandemic has underlined the need to develop uninterrupted supply chain for food, medicines, and other basic essential commodities. As the global supply chain has been severely disrupted, it has created opportunity for more intra-regional trade in the region. To seize this opportunity, member states may agree to some trade facilitation measures, including simplification of customs procedures, introduction of electronic tracking system for cross-border container movement, and acceptance of electronic copies of export-import related documents. Trade facilitation measures need to be accompanied by efficient transport connectivity to ensure easy movement of goods and people. Renewed emphasis will be needed to develop a resilient regional transport connectivity system capable of withstanding future disruptions. Special focus on coastal shipping, waterways, and railways will be needed. Already, Bangladesh and India have increased the frequency of freight trains to compensate for the reduced trade through Benapole-Petrapole land port. BIMSTEC coastal shipping agreement needs to be concluded without delay to avoid high cost and congestion associated with land transport connectivity. In the midst of COVID-19, the use of technology in daily activities, including online banking, online trading, online education, online webinars, online tracing and monitoring of COVID-19 patients, online medical consultation, etc., have come in handy, which should be retained and promoted regionally in the post-COVID-19 period. Tourism and hospitality industry has been severely hit by the pandemic. It will be challenging to restore intra-regional tourism before the pandemic subsides. Member states can use this time to develop necessary tourism infrastructure so that domestic tourism can flourish in the short term and the ground is ready for more effective and efficient cross-border tourism in the medium and long term. It will also be helpful to develop regional protocol to ensure more predictable ways to handle travel within the region. The ongoing BIMSTEC tourism promotion study by Asian Development Bank is expected to make a set of recommendations covering these issues. In the post-COVID-19 period, public health is expected to get renewed attention. Member states may use the BIMSTEC platform to collaborate in training of healthcare personnel in the short term, and they may also use BIMSTEC platform for development of regional value chain for pharmaceutical industries and collaborative research in the medium and long term. Taking advantage of BIMSTEC's strong collaboration in traditional medicine, our experts in traditional medicine could also collaborate in finding ways to combat COVID-19. COVID-19 will not be the last calamity to befall our region. It will therefore be important to develop common programs to address regional vulnerabilities to natural disasters, floods, climate change, poverty, and precarious food and energy security. Agriculture and food security should be further emphasized in the post-COVID-19 BIMSTEC cooperation. Development of region-wide early warning system, as suggested by the UNESCAP paper, will be very helpful to cope with natural disasters. The pandemic is also likely to aggravate other cross-border threats like irregular migration and human trafficking. Member states may collaborate through BIMSTEC platform to cope with these challenges. The post-COVID-19 recovery and rehabilitation is likely to take a long time. This will be a time for South Asian countries to create economic activities through more interregional trade, transaction and transport infrastructure building, financial cooperation, promotion of SMEs, etc. Assistance from UN system, ADB, IMF, World Bank, and other development partners will play a crucial role in this process. This will also be a time for South Asian countries to strengthen the regional organizations they have created. Thank you, Madam Chairperson.
Thank you very much, Excellency Secretary BIMSTEC. Mr. Shahidul Islam, you touch on quite several issues regarding the importance of a resilient transport connectivity system, trade facilitation, the need to promote this digital economy, as well as also how to strengthen resilience. While earlier on, Secretary General of SAARC also alluded the importance of deepening regional cooperation. To be part of this long-term development strategy, as well as showcase, the initial response by way of joining forces. In the case of this SAARC COVID-19 Emergency Fund. So with that, we've heard the views and thoughts from both Secretary General of SAARC and BIMSTEC, and now is the time that we hear from Dr. Nagesh Kumar, who will make a brief presentation of our policy brief on COVID-19. So the floor is yours, Nagesh. Over to you.
Thank you, Ibu Amida. Excellencies, distinguished delegates and friends, it's a pleasure to share some brief highlights of the COVID-19 and South Asia paper of ESCAP. This is part of the UN ESCAP framework on socio-economic impact that Ibu Amida was mentioning in her opening remarks. and it emphasizes on building back better. So let me go over this presentation rather quickly because the paper has been circulated and you're familiar with it. Yeah. So basically, we began by looking at the preparedness of South Asian countries in meeting the challenge that pandemic like COVID posed. And we looked at the initial conditions and we found that the slow progress of South Asian countries on SDGs has affected their preparedness to deal with the pandemic, including the gaps in public health infrastructure, access to basic amenities like sanitation, and gaps in the ICT connectivity. And also the pervasive informality of employment has left the bulk of the workers in South Asia out of the social safety nets. And the governments also, because of elevated levels of fiscal deficits in the past few years, found themselves with relatively small fiscal space to deal with a crisis like this. And coming to the socio-economic impacts, and it has already been discussed, the pandemic has impacted South Asian economies and societies in a very severe manner. The micro, small, and medium enterprises have been among the worst impacted, leading to loss of jobs and livelihoods. The international trade has collapsed. In fact, there is a prediction of 30% decline in world trade this year, which has led to cancellation of export orders for garments and other goods that are exported by South Asian countries. Tourism is all but dried up, affecting the countries like Maldives that are highly dependent upon tourism, but there are other South Asian countries dependent upon tourism as well. Remittances, which are important sources of foreign exchange for many South Asian countries, especially Nepal, are expected to decline by 22% this year. So altogether, South Asian economies are likely to shrink for the first time in 4 decades. And this is not a good news. It's a very serious issue for South Asian countries. But much more importantly, or maybe a bigger concern, is the loss of jobs and livelihoods pushing up to 132 million people. This is according to our CG simulations, into extreme poverty. This means reversing the progress made in the whole decade. So this is, I think, very serious. The other thing is that inequalities are likely to widen as vulnerable and marginal groups are affected much more adversely. We know that women are at the forefront of the COVID impact, either whether as health workers or workers in the garment factories. They are facing the biggest onslaught. And then the slum dwellers living in the slums, which are highly densely packed with people, are also very severely impacted. The migrant workers, youth, older persons, and persons with disabilities. Altogether, the story which is coming out is that the more vulnerable and marginal groups are getting affected more, and then inequalities will be rising further. The rising food insecurity could have long-term consequences on health outcomes, especially of children, school children who are getting midday meals in the school. And for many children in South Asia, that was the only healthy meal they were getting in the day. So those are the very important socio-economic impacts. Now, coming to the national strategies to mitigate the impacts, and governments have been, of course, acting in all of the South Asian countries. What we have argued is a case for a large people-centered, inclusive and sustainable relief and stimulus package. We have tried to estimate what could be a large enough size to mitigate the challenge that they are facing. And the numbers which we get from our simulations are putting them between 7 to 14% of GDP. So they are relatively large kind of packages we need. And obviously, the first priority of these packages should be on saving lives through strengthening public health infrastructure by beefing up the gaps in public health infrastructure that governments are doing. But in the medium term, move towards universal health cover. The other important priority is to enhance the social protection for livelihood security, and in the short term, in immediate term, expand the existing programs such as NREGA in India, EHSAS and BISP in Pakistan, and similarly there are other similar programs in Bangladesh. So expand them, in a big manner, and in the medium term, move towards universal social protection. And we are arguing that this can be combined, the expansion of these social security programs like NREGA or EHSAS, with green, inclusive, and gender-sensitive, activities to build public infrastructure, public goods to address multiple and intersecting deprivations through, for instance, waste recycling projects, waste to energy projects, microhydel, and there are many others. So we move towards a more sustainable pattern of society while creating jobs. And most importantly, reigniting the South Asia's growth engines by immediate infusion of funds to MSMEs, which have been impacted very badly. We have also talked about inclusive and sustainable urban reconfiguration, replacing the urban slums, making them more decentralized and more friendly to the slum dwellers, the people who are living there, and harnessing new opportunities through reskilling of the workforce to harness the new opportunities in digital economy, for instance. Now, how this package of stimulus could be financed? And obviously, for addressing this once-in-a-century type of crisis, governments may have to put aside the targets of fiscal prudence in the short term. But it would be very helpful if they had also a credible strategy to return to fiscal prudence once the crisis has abated. And of course, we need to look at all different ways of generating or mobilizing new resources, including through innovative and new taxes, voluntary donations and corporate social responsibility, their potential to be harnessed. International cooperation is, of course, most critical, and the international financial institutions like IMF, World Bank, ADB, and all others have issued or disbursed quick loans to all the South Asian countries. They are certainly very helpful, but we need to look at some out of the box kind of proposals, like issue of new SDRs in a very large manner by IMF to ease the liquidity problems faced by developing countries. Now, finally, coming to the South Asian cooperation, and I must say that both the Secretary Generals, both SAARC Secretary General and BIMSTEC Secretary Generals, they have already emphasized a lot on the importance and criticality of South Asian cooperation. Already, as the SAARC Secretary General talked about, the leaders of South Asian countries have started coordinating the actions for addressing the crisis and have established a health emergency fund. But this momentum, and both of them have emphasized on this, should be built upon to harness the underutilized or unutilized potential of intra-South Asian trade. And our estimates suggest that 2/3 of this potential remains unutilized. And harnessing this potential through a comprehensive economic partnership would be critical for accelerating the recovery, especially in the context of collapse of world trade. Then for harnessing this trade potential, as Secretary General of BIMSTEC also highlighted, it would be very important to strengthen the surface transport corridors and facilitation at the borders, including through an electronic tracking system in South Asia. And we have also argued that cooperation could help in fast-tracking the clean energy transition and for enhancing the food security and climate resilience of agriculture of South Asian countries. As it has been mentioned already, South Asian governments have turned to digital technology for delivery of many services in the lockdown period, including telemedicine and direct benefit transfers. It has underlined the importance and criticality of closing the digital divide in South Asia and also of sharing good practices. And South Asia, as a disaster-prone region, highly disaster-prone region, could benefit from working together on things like regional early warning systems. And these are some of the areas actually in which ESCAP has been working with the member states and also regional groupings like SAARC and BIMSTEC. And I think we need to do much more in the context of this crisis hitting the sub-region. To conclude, COVID pandemic poses a mammoth development challenge for South Asia, threatening to reverse the hard-won development gains of a decade, if not more. And this extraordinary challenge requires equally extraordinary response, but the objective should not be to go back to the status quo ante, as Ibu Amida mentioned in the beginning, but build back better through large, inclusive, and sustainable stimulus packages that decarbonize the economies while creating jobs and incomes, and move towards universal social protection and universal health coverage. We have also argued about South Asian cooperation having the potential to complement national strategies for building back better, and UNESCAP as the development partner of South Asia will continue to work with the member states in promoting such cooperation, including in collaboration with SAARC, BIMSTEC, BBIN, and other such frameworks. Thank you very much, Ibu Amida and Excellencies. This is the end of my presentation. Over to you, Ibu Amida.
Okay, thank you very much, Nageshi, for the very comprehensive and succinct presentation on, again, our ESCAP policy paper. And now it is my privilege, our privilege, to have a very high level representation from each of the South Asian member states. This clearly shows how much importance is attached to the present challenge due to this COVID-19 pandemic, and also how knowledge sharing and cooperation among members can contribute to this path forward to recover better compared to the pre-COVID-19 era. So, Excellencies, I would appreciate certainly that if we could focus the remarks on the policy responses or options taken to mitigate the crisis as well to recover better in your respective country, as well as your perspectives on how South Asian, again, countries and stakeholders can cooperate to address the crisis. So with that, I would like to invite Excellencies by following the alphabetical order of countries, name of countries, represented, and with that, I would like to first invite His Excellency, Dr. Mustafa Mastur, Minister of Economy, Government of Afghanistan. The floor is yours, Excellency. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Madam Under Secretary General Hamida Salsia, Excellency Mr. Ruwan Birakoon, Secretary General of SAARC, Excellency Mr. Shahidul Islam, Secretary General of BIMSTEC, Minister Muhammad Abdul Manan, Minister Loknath Sharma, Minister Muhammad Vice Chairman Dr. Rajiv Kumar, Vice Chairman Dr. Raj Kadal, Dr. Shabnam Sarfaraz, Director General Dr. Soga Gama, Director Nagesh Kumar, all excellencies, the names. Good afternoon for those who are in the South Asia, and good morning for those who are behind us. It is really a pleasure to join you today in this high-level policy dialogue on COVID-19 and South Asia to take stock of the socio-economic impacts, national strategies, and regional cooperation for building back better. You know that COVID-19 came at a time when our country was already grappling with a number of socio-economic and political issues, including a sluggish economic growth, a poverty rate of above 50%, and a double-digit unemployment rate. Coming to COVID, official numbers indicate that the registered coronavirus cases in Afghanistan has passed 34,000, with a number of deaths nearing 1,000. Recovery is about 62%. To curb the spread of COVID-19, early on, major cities where most of economic activities are concentrated were put to a partial lockdown. This in turn halted certain economic activities, as in every country, in the services and manufacturing sectors, further impacting the overall economic growth in the country. Our estimates in the month of March indicated that the economy will shrink by 3%. But the latest global economic prospects report published by the World Bank shows that Afghanistan, among the South Asia, our economy will shrink by 5.5%. Our initial assessment also showed that a 7% increase in the prices of items such as fees poverty from 54.5%, which is the baseline, to 61.5%, pushing another 2.2 million people below the poverty line, or extreme poverty, as Nagesh was saying, part of the 132 million in the South Asia. As far as COVID impact on the private sector, our findings is not that much different from the ones that we've already heard and the ones that we are reading in the reports, that close to 76% of micro enterprises were considered to be the most vulnerable to the lockdowns. Small and medium-sized businesses showed also a greater level of vulnerabilities. Micro, small, medium enterprises in Afghanistan provide 25% of the employment opportunities in the country, assuming that over 80% of them were highly vulnerable to lockdowns. Many of them were forced to lay off their employees. Our findings shows that the total unemployment rate could go as high as 40%. Colleagues, as soon as lockdowns were imposed, we in the government prepared a response plan to mitigate the socioeconomic impact of the pandemic. We conducted a rapid assessment of the economy, a vulnerability assessment of the economic sector, and proposed a number of immediate measures, including price controls, reducing tariffs on basic items imported during the lockdown, such as food, beverages, and health items, increased cooperation and discussions with the neighboring countries, major trade partners, to ensure supply of basic and necessary items during the lockdowns are available. We amended our current fiscal year's national budget to allocate around $1.1 billion, which is 20% of our national budget and 5% of our GDP to fight the pandemic, which is a big amount for a country like Afghanistan that is already in conflict. Though the number of cases or the number of the human costs and report deaths are relatively low, as I mentioned earlier, but we understand that the economic cost of the pandemic will be really huge, and the challenges, as Nagesh said, the mammoth development challenges are there. A number of measures were taken to consolidate our efforts in the health sector, including allocating of $318 million to combat the coronavirus, for improving health system infrastructure, establishing new testing labs, preparation of isolation facilities, increasing case surveillance, public awareness, and 24-hour assistance measures, and increase. On the social protection front, as we heard the case in South Asia, around 360 million we allocated for humanitarian assistance involving programs as free distribution by the bakeries for the most poor, and also grain emergency grain distribution, and around $430 million was allocated to reduce families' expenditures such as electricity and utility bills exemptions. As far as our response to support the private sector is concerned, we have conducted assessment of the result of our work has been a package of proposed measures derived other countries' experience in the region that recommends a series of support measures, including deferral of tax payments, free or low interest loans, municipal and electricity bills postponement or exemptions for all sizes of the businesses. We expect that the Cabinet of Ministers approve the supplementary package soon. Ladies and gentlemen, although it is still early for all of us to predict the precise magnitude of the damages by COVID, without a doubt, it has reversed that we were made in the last few years. The crisis has pushed a large number of our citizens under the poverty line, increased hunger and food insecurity, significantly changed the health system priorities, affected quality education, pushed down economic growth, and increased unemployment. However, as we look forward and plan to build back better, our focus needs to shift to invest more on sustainable development goals and to unlock long-term drivers of economic growth. We need to increase the capacity of our institutions and increase investment, particularly in disaster and preparedness, as well as health, education, infrastructure, governance, and social protection. Further digitalization and use of new technology will allow us to move away from physical activities to online operations, thereby improving efficiency, sustainability, and effectiveness of our programs. Excellencies, regional coordination and connectivity, as mentioned by the previous speakers, offers us huge opportunities to benefit from. Therefore, fostering implementation of mega projects, at least we have 3 of them already going on, that helps us, Pakistan, and also India, will continue to play a major role in our cross-border trade and economic prosperity of our region. We all know that financing sustainable development and coordination of efforts around implementation of SDGs has always been a challenge, particularly in fragile and conflict situations. To that end, we request UNESCAP on a broader level and UNDP on a more focused level to enhance their role in implementation and efficiency of the sustainable development goals in our countries, especially in conflict and fragile environments. And that's why my worry is that we will be much behind to achieve the SDGs in 2030. I think it is time for me to stop. I just want to say that I might, in a time that you all know that Afghanistan experienced 42 years of conflict, but we are just to begin the negotiation with our major opponent, Taliban, in coming weeks. And I might move to a new role, but as a Minister for Peace, where my focus would be to move away slightly from war economy to peace economy. I really enjoyed working with all of you, with UNESCAP over the last few years, and I look forward to playing a different role in bringing prosperity into our region, but still, I'm looking forward to be in closer contact with all of you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Excellency Minister Mastur, for your very, very comprehensive presentation, including the mitigation effort policy by your government, as well as already has the vision or the plan on how to shift also to invest to SDG, as well as the long-term drivers of economic growth, as well as the importance of regional coordination and cooperation. So again, with that, I sincerely thank for your insight. May I now turn to His Excellency, Mr. Muhammad Abdul Manan, Minister of Planning of Government of Bangladesh, to take the floor. The time is yours, Excellency. Excellency, apologize. I think you have to unmute your microphone. Yes.
Hi. Can I be heard now? Okay. Thank you, ma'am.
Yes, it's good.
All right, thank you. Once again, it's a great pleasure for me to be able to extend my respects to you, Ms. Dr. Armida Alisabana, our distinguished Executive Secretary and UN Under Secretary General of UNESCAP, and also to the other distinguished guests, particularly to Secretary Generals of our regional bodies, Mr. Isala Ruwan Burakan of SARC, and Mr. Shahidul Islam of BIMSTEC, sitting here in Dhaka, Bangladesh, and our good friend Nagesh Kumar, who is looking after the regional matters of this, our organization, SCAP. I'm particularly pleased to be able to extend my greetings to colleagues from all SARC countries, and I begin with Dr. Mustafa Mastur from Afghanistan. I wish him luck in his new very important job that he's moving into, looking after peace for our brothers in Afghanistan, which is long overdue. Wish you good luck, Dr. Masood. We have here Mr. Leompo Loknath Sharma, a neighbor from Bhutan, and Dr. Rajiv Kumar, neighbor from India, Mr. Muhammad Aslam, another neighbor from Maldives, Dr. Professor Pushparaj Kadil, sitting on our head in Nepal, our good neighbor Nepal, Ms. Dr. Shabnam Sarfraz from Pakistan, and of course, Dr. Shugat Yelegama, good friend from Sri Lanka. For all of you, greetings, warm greetings from Bangladesh. Good afternoon to everybody. I wish to extend our government's appreciation and thanks for UNESCAP for organizing this very timely and important session of a webinar so that we can meet friends and exchange views on a very important current issue of concern to all of us, not only in the region, but across all over the globe. So in that extent, in that context, I would like to make my brief presentation. The COVID-19 pandemic is causing an unprecedented disruption to the global economy. The resultant socio-economic impact is being transmitted through different channels. The International Monetary Fund, IMF, warned that the pandemic might push the global economy into the worst recession since the Great Depression of the 30s. and far worse than the one triggered by the global financial crisis of 2008 and 9, with the low-income countries being harder hit. As per IMF projections, the global economy would contract by 3% in 2020, while the World Bank thinks the global economy will decline by 2 to 3.9%. Using simulations from a general equilibrium modeling exercise, the Asian Development Bank derives that the global economy could lose between $5.8 trillion to $8.8 trillion, equivalent to about 6.4% to 9.7% of the global gross domestic product. Global trade contracted by 3% in the first quarter of 2020. According to the UNCTAD, the downturn would accelerate in the second quarter, and so the world trade would decline by 27%. This is echoed by the World Trade Organization, WTO, which has projected that the world merchandise trade would shrink between 13 and 32% in 2020. The COVID-19 pandemic is expected to cause huge job losses for migrant workers and thus affect remittance flows. According to the Institute for Public Policy Research, migrant workers are particularly likely to work in accommodation and food services, one of the most affected sectors of the COVID-19 crisis. The World Bank projections found that global remittance flows would decline sharply by 20% in 2020. Ladies and gentlemen, up until the crisis, Bangladesh economy had been growing close to 7% a year on average over the last decade. World Bank now projects 2% for our growth in 2020, a drop of nearly 6 percentage points from 2018. The economic impact has been felt in three main avenues. First, a drop in domestic economic activity after the shutdown announced in March 26, now gradually being lifted. The second is a decline in exports of ready-made garments, which is the backbone of our export trade, providing about 85% plus of the net earning from our overseas trading. And finally, there has been a fall in remittances from Bangladesh, from Bangladeshis living mostly in Middle Eastern countries and in Malaysia, affected not just by the pandemic, but also by the decline in oil prices. What is the outlook for the future, for us particularly? We are still expecting a pickup in activity toward the end of 2020. We're still expecting, bracing ourselves, but we are uncertain. And in 2021, with growth climbing back to around 6% by our present estimation, which our friends in the ADB also supports us from their studies. Of course, that depends on the domestic economy starting to recover. There is so much uncertainty, and it is very difficult to ascertain with precision the recovery speed or extent. We still expect that the country would quickly come back to previous growth rates if global economic conditions are supportive, and others also pick up, like we pick up. What particular challenges has Bangladesh faced during this crisis? Bangladesh is one of the most densely populated countries in the world, as you know very well. And this is a huge challenge when you are trying to contain the impact of a pandemic like COVID-19. Another challenge is limited health infrastructure from our old colonial days. The capacity of the health system is really being put to test and requires considerable support from development partners. It is estimated that the country needs about $250 million immediately for clinical equipment, testing, and contact tracing, just to respond to the initial impact. Happily, two loans of $100 million each from World Bank and ADB provided urgent help in building up the capacity. We are now implementing these two projects, and our system on the ground has shown some improvement. Another $250 million of IMF resources in the form of loans under the Rapid Credit Facility, RCF, and Rapid Financing Instrument, RFI, will be channeled to the budget to help the government meet its new spending needs in health and social protection. To meet the balance of payment needs and to catalyze additional donor support. Financing from other international institutions and donors has also been approved. What will be the effect on Bangladesh's debt situation? Ladies and gentlemen, before the crisis, Bangladesh was in a very good position with the low risk of overall and external debt distress. We anticipate that all the crisis-related borrowing will raise the public debt to GDP ratio to about 41% of GDP over the coming years from the present 36% at the end of 2019. Even so, debt should remain sustainable. In a way, this is testament to the sound economic and fiscal policies implemented in the recent years. With limited aid dependency, prudent borrowing, and up until the crisis, adherence to deficit ceiling of 5% of GDP. We have religiously been following this 5% marker for the last so many years. Over the medium term, the government needs to mobilize more resources domestically to fund additional spending on health, education, infrastructure, and social protection. This must be the case for all of us in the region. What is being done to protect the country's large vulnerable population? That's a very important point. Since March, several stimulus measures were deployed to sustain economic activity and protect the most vulnerable. There is a package of about $600 million to support the wages of workers in the ready-made garment sector, provided in the form of subsidized loans to companies so that they can pay wages for 3 months. This is very important because the ready-made garment sector is responsible for much of the recent progress in incorporating women into formal economic activity. Additionally, fund totaling about $150 million will be provided as cash assistance to about 5 million families displaced by the pandemic. There are also measures to protect the homeless and for food distribution. Cash allowances for the elderly, widows, and disabled individuals under what is called social safety net programs in this country are being expanded. The number of people who were beyond the net earlier over the years are being included this year in the current budget. Amid the crisis, how can the country continue to address climate change concerns? Climate change is a priority for Bangladesh's development objectives, as it is one of the country's most vulnerable to extreme weather events. Increased investments in adaptations have made the country more resilient to natural disasters. Cyclone Amphan, who is familiar to all of us here in the region, a few weeks ago, was perhaps less devastating than initially feared because of better early warning systems and more investments in embankment, infrastructures, and shelters. As efforts to promote a green recovery takes hold, Bangladesh is also well placed to attract foreign investment that will contribute to climate change mitigation. Ladies and gentlemen, greater regional cooperation, we believe, through UNESCAP particularly, and our two regional bodies, SAARC and BIMSTEC, inter alia, can reduce the impact of the pandemic and help us all recover and resume. So with this note of positive note and extending our country's hands of cooperation and friendship to all of us in the region, we would like to assure that through ESCAP and through other regional bodies, our government would contribute fully and wholly, not only in meeting the needs of this post-pandemic recovery, but in all other areas of development and in all other areas of living together in peace and harmony. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. Ma'am, thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister Manan, for your, again, overview as well as the priority policy response of your government and also the importance, again, placed on regional cooperation. Thank you very much. May I now turn to His Excellency, Mr. Leonpo Loknath Sharma, Minister of Economic Affairs from Bhutan. Excellency, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon, good afternoon, Excellency Amida Alice Zavana, Under Secretary General of the United Nations and Executive Secretary of SCAP, Secretary General SAC, BIMSTEC, Excellencies from other South Asian countries, a very good afternoon to you all. It's a privilege to be able to participate today with you all in a policy dialogue when all the countries all over the world are fighting life and livelihoods. It has been very difficult for all of us to make a decision between life and livelihood. Both are equally important. Therefore, the elements of health, the elements of social security, the elements of health security, when combined together, fight with economy, we come out with more stronger, sustainable and inclusive socio-economic development probably hereafter. This word will find more meaning with this pandemic. This pandemic has hit hard to all of us, and the English dictionary has added few more words, probably even the health dictionary. With this, dear colleagues, dear excellencies, Bhutan is not far. We have seen difficulties equally harsh, in fact, much more maybe compared to some other countries, because we are a landlocked country which is facing difficulty because of this problem. When it comes to COVID, so far we have been able to do well. I would rather say we have zero community transmission so far. All whatever COVID cases, 80 cases we have received are all in the quarantine facilities, and more than 50 have recovered. We have zero death, and the government assures the public to maintain zero death from COVID. In addition to that, we're also trying hard to ensure that we do not anticipate community transmission, though that's a very far-fetched promise. With this, I would go to impacts of COVID. Our tourism sector, service sector, particularly the hotel sector, and then the construction sector are hit very, very hard. Bhutan depends much in the tourism sector, which you all know, and then for 2019-20, in fact, it is declining by 41%. So this is the decline of this revenue to the country is really huge for a small country like ours. In the construction sector, again, we are hit hard because whatever workers, expedite workers we used to get with these lockdowns and with this pandemic, it has sharply declined. And wherever we have also are trying to go out or having difficulties to work. Therefore, with this kind of situation, Bhutan is already facing a dearth or a gap of around 15 to 20,000 workers if we take into our hydropower construction into picture. Besides that, a recent study has found that in the tourism, every 1/3 of those involved in tourism and related sector have lost their jobs. 3 out of 4 households involved in tourism or tourism-related sectors are experiencing a drop in their monthly household income. Therefore, we are finding it very, very difficult. Besides tourism, as we all know, aviation sector, hospitality sector, even arts and crafts industries, those informal economies, and mostly those cottage and small industries, which this government has placed so much importance on cottage and small industries, because for a small country like ours, small is beautiful. That's why we had been so much focused in cottage and small scale industries. But due to this pandemic, we're really hit hard in this sector too, as it's difficult to get raw materials as well as difficult to get export markets. In the initiatives taken by the government, one is So far, this country has done well when it comes to Corbett or Corbett's impact or getting Corbett inside the country or in the health sector because of the tall leadership of our king, who has been forefront into this. We're blessed with this. Bhutan is particularly blessed with this. Then the government, who has health personnel in it, led by the Prime Minister, who is a doctor by himself, Health Minister, and also the Foreign Minister. I think Bhutan had been lucky when it comes to this. We have managed so well. In the initiatives taken through the relief fund, Druk Gyalpo's relief fund, that is from His Majesty's welfare, people have been given, granted a welfare, which is called KEDU, who are impacted by this pandemic, particularly in the construction and in the hotel or in the tourism sector. So far, we have released around 700 million rupees to around 24,000 people from April, May, June. That was the first part, 3 months. We're continuing this from July, August, September as well. And much more will be there. It's expected equal numbers would again come, if not more. That's what the second phase will continue, and then it will just now will continue till September. Here, those who have lost job and who immediately who do not have a prospective income, they are going to get this. This is a direct kind of stipend to them through the His Majesty's Relief Fund. Similarly, in fact, it could be seen as an fiscal measure, a monetary measure, but is also a welfare from His Majesty to waive off the interest for our borrowers. This had particularly benefited quite a lot of people, around 20% of the country's population, which is estimated at around 145,460 people who are benefited. Their interest was waived for April, May, June. It will be waived again for July, August, September, 100%, and then 50%. So these kind of relief measures have really helped many of our people who would have been hit hard into poverty, into inequalities, and into unemployment. All these three things by this initiative have been contained so far. I would also like to say that we have also come out with the first series of economic contingency plan. This is an immediate measure to address our economy through some construction bill. We have addressed here three current problems, that is in the construction sector. How do we inspire our youths to come more in the construction sector, or those who are without job and who have lost job to come to the construction sector? Two is, how do we make our tourism sector resilient and skill and reskill those and also value add to that tourism sector? Third is in agriculture sector. This will continue. In this also, the government is very keen in this economic contingency plan. Then there is, as other countries are also doing, we have loan deferral for our borrowers. Besides waiver of interest, loan deferral is another added incentive given to our borrowers, so that they are not pressed by the financial institutes. This will also continue for another 3 months. We would also like to add that in the Economic Contingency Fund, government has around 400 billion or 4,558 million, which government is pumping into this sector for skilling, reskilling, and as I said, in agriculture, construction, and tourism sector. Beside this, in the 12th, this is our 12th plan. 2 years of 12th plan is finished. We have 3 more years. In these 3-4 years, we have reprioritized our activities so that we can really implement some of the infrastructural activities so that our countries goes into infrastructure as establishments to get more economic benefits, to get into more employment, and also will be able to establish bigger and better manufacturing and industry sector. These are some of the strategies we have taken forward, and then these are some of the plans we have, besides ensuring that the public health is taken care very well. Besides this interest loan deferral, interest waiver. We also have deferred corporate tax and business income tax for 2019 for the people to file, which was supposed to be done by June. Now with this, I would also like to touch upon the collaboration sector and the collaborations and partnership for resource mobilization. It's very, very important for international financial institutes, for the bigger countries and multinational or multilateral companies, multilateral organizations to help the smaller countries, to help the South Asian countries who had already been fighting to alleviate poverty or to improve unemployment or to bridge the gap of inequality. If those who can afford to help and support do not come forward, these countries are going to face much severe difficulties, as everyone has pointed out now and then. We have also received, of course, support from UNDP, WHO, and other multilateral donors and multilateral companies of equivalent to around 41 million. We're very grateful. We have also applied for COVID loan, which ADP and World Bank is facilitating. We are hopeful that they will support us for sure to implement some of the COVID-related activities. We are also part and partner. We have express ourselves as in part to India SAARC COVID Response Fund, which was initiated a few months back by His Excellency Narendra Modi ji, the Prime Minister of India. I'm sure this kind of regional collaboration will come up more and everybody will join hands, and there will be economic integration at the regional level. The global economy, as we always used to talk, has been hit hard, and the question arises whether it will bounce back to its former glory. Similarly, the question of economic integration, export, import, how do we bounce back to the former glory will really be questionable and will take time. And countries like, small countries like us are really hit hard because our own economy of scale is very, very small. To go forward, we are working on the comprehensive economic revamp strategy, the economic contingency plan Series 2, which we're thinking to focus more on manufacturing and industry sector. And then also we are trying to see how do we bring back the services sector, and also how do we join the bandwagon of V growth. We don't want to also have L growth and U growth, so we would like to have V growth. Revival of the economy should be in the form of V and not L and W or U, whatever. With this, I would like to end my session here. And once more, thank you everyone for giving us an opportunity and time to share our own what's happening in our countries around and what can be done further. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Excellency, for giving the insights on impact on Bhutan, policy responses, also again the importance of regional collaboration. Thank you, Excellency. May I now turn over to His Excellency Dr. Rajiv Kumar, Vice Chairman of Niti Aayog of India. Excellency, the time is yours.
Thank you, Your Excellency, Ms. Armida Jahanpanah, Excellency Mr. Veerakun, Excellency Mr. Shahidul Islam, Dr. Nagesh Kumar, eminent ministers from all our neighboring countries. A very good afternoon to you, and what a wonderful opportunity after a long time to come together, though in a virtual manner, in these special times. So congratulations to the ESCAP for organizing this meeting, and congratulations especially to the Southeast Asia office for preparing a very, very well thought out background briefing paper. It covers a lot of issues, and Your Excellency, with your permission, I'll rather focus more on the recommendation made there than talk more about India's response, which is actually now pretty much sort of well out there and in the public domain. So with those few words, let me start off, Excellency, saying that I think everybody is talked about the fact that we have to avoid any trade-off between lives and livelihoods. All our governments, all the governments in the region and everywhere are undertaking this difficult task of balancing the policy response to save lives and to save livelihoods as well. And I think this is something that we in India are also grappling with. But this can happen if we also decide, as has been mentioned in the briefing paper, to convert this crisis into an opportunity, because to save livelihoods, to improve the welfare levels of our people, to try and make sure that we do not slip far too back on Agenda 2030, we must use this time to convert this into opportunity to take measures, to undertake reforms which will help the region and individual countries come out of it stronger, come out of it more prepared to face the challenges, and go back to our robust recovery, and especially that focused on the bottom of the pyramid, and so that our SDG targets are met. Your Excellency, it's very clear that the crisis has not come at a very good time for our region. We were not so well prepared. Our fiscal space was not that big. Our monetary situation was also quite tight, and therefore all our countries, I find, in the region are fighting for policy space, both monetary and fiscal policy, to be able to meet, to be able to respond to the crisis. And we, all of us, have quite assiduously, quite seriously followed our fiscal prudence targets in the past. These will have to be given up. I suppose in this period, we have the sanction of both the World Bank, the IMF, and the ADB to say that this is not the time to focus so much on fiscal discipline and prudence, because with that we may not be able to square this circle of lives versus livelihoods. So I think we need to take cognizance of that, and therefore all of us should be prepared. And the SCAP Secretariat would do well to tell us as to where this region comes in terms of its debt to GDP ratio. At the moment, the global debt to GDP ratio is an astounding 225%. For the developed economies, and 167% for the world as a whole. This region is well below 100%. Is in fact in the range of more likely less than around 50 to 60%. Do we have that space? And if yes, how best to mobilize these resources so that we can ramp up our debt to GDP ratio and use that debt to invest in infrastructure. And that's, I think, one of the biggest focus that we have in this government. And we also learned from our northern neighbor China, who responded to the 2008-9 crisis by building up very much the infrastructure facilities and using that time to ramp up investment. So should we do that in this region as well. Now here, I think we need to look at, in this regard, the alternate sources for resource mobilization. Not just taxes. We have to look at non-tax revenues. We have to look at external financing, both from multilateral and bilateral sources, both in terms of equity and in debt and in portfolio and foreign direct investments. Government of India therefore has announced a major liberalization in its FDI policies, including in defense, where you can now have 76% of ownership through automatic route. The other big source we are trying to look at, and I commend this to all our neighbor friends, is that most of our governments had a lot of wealth in their assets, which can now be converted into capital. So if we take actually the step of asset monetization a bit seriously, we might find that we have quite severely underutilized assets, which can today be made use of in converting and plug this gap, the fiscal gap, because as we know, with the very sharp decline in GDP growth that we are expecting for this region, for India as a whole, nearly about 5%, and for the world economy at 4.9%, our revenues are sure to drop. Our tax revenues are sure to drop. So we'll have to find those additional resources. And I mentioned therefore two or three additional alternative resources, which I think should be looked at. And again, the SCAP Secretariat would do well to help us in this regard, and maybe undertake an exercise of quantifying all the assets that we might have in these countries and in BIMSTEC region, which can be converted, as I said, into capital. The third point that I want to make is that this crisis must be used to learn the very right lessons on our health front, and what is required to meet a pandemic. We were fortunate. This region was fortunate to have missed, thankfully, the SARS pandemic that happened in East Asia, where some of our friends, for example, in Taiwan, Korea, China, they learned their lessons, and those lessons have come in very handy for them this time to respond to this pandemic. We hadn't had that experience. We are going through that unfortunate experience now. We can use that to draw out all the lessons and put them together, and so that we can get a manual, as it were, for responding to any future, God forbid, but any future pandemic. These viruses are going to be around. They will come back again. They visit us every so often, every 20 years. So I think it will be best time to learn from this, and to therefore tweak our national disaster management plans as well as we can going forward. I think all of us have emphasized the fact that we need to look at the people who are going to be pushed back into poverty. The briefing paper talks about 120 million of people in South Asia with the possibility of being pushed back into poverty. This is not a good thing, and we need to fight that as much as we can. So therefore, in India at least, we've got some very significantly resourced schemes. The Garib Kalyan Yojana, the Mahatma Gandhi, rural employment guarantee scheme. We've got the Ayushman Bharat to look after health insurance. 800 million people have been given access to free food until November because of this reason. And the Prime Minister has emphasized significantly those at the bottom of the pyramid must not suffer as a result of this pandemic and loss of jobs, which is inevitable in this case. So, and we are emphasizing also the rural infrastructure schemes as we go forward there. So those are and I think and the second part of this is the unorganized medium and small enterprises, where again, for example, in India alone, we have something like 60 million of such businesses units. The cash crunch that they are facing, with the total loss of revenue in these 3 months, should not be allowed to convert itself into insolvency. And this is where I think the Indian government's 3 lakh crore credit guarantee scheme for the small and medium enterprises is an example of affording credit by government guarantees by banks, so that these enterprises can rebuild themselves. And similarly, a 5,000 crore scheme has been given only for street vendors, so that they could refurbish themselves, they could build up their inventories back again. Your Excellency, ladies and gentlemen, I want to emphasize the fact that this is the time to once again refurbish regional cooperation. And I think what we need is that, because if we can, then we can think about once more building infrastructure connectivity, because that will help us a lot in doing that. Again, if we take those decisions now, I think we'll be better equipped to bolster, to promote our recovery as we go forward after the crisis, because this crisis will, of course, surely end, and at that time we should find ourselves, in a better position. 2 suggestions in this regard. One, maybe this is also the time to develop a regional tourism program. Our tourism sector has been hurt very badly. There's been total revenue loss, zero revenues for the last 3 or 4 months, and this will take time to recover, because people will have to get over their fears. People will have to start getting over their hesitation to come back, and the aviation. So therefore, the tourism and the aviation sector could do very well by working together and collaborating to once more try and make a regional tourism destination plan which could be promoted to attract the tourists back from within Asia, let me say. You know, the Asian tourist itself now is a very huge source. You don't have to look only towards Europe and North America for origins of tourism. You can do it within Asia. So I think that's the one. And the second and the last point that I do want to make here is that I think this is probably time for this region to start thinking about, you know, agroecology, to start thinking about agriculture, which can also help climate change, to start thinking about agriculture, which will not use all the chemicals and fertilizers and pesticides that we have used. Sikkim and Bhutan have given us the lead in that regard. As, for example, Sri Lanka has given us the lead in having the best health facilities which we can emulate from. And I think those are the sort of learning from each other that we can encourage. And if we focus all together on agroecology, then we can make sure that this region can come up as a major agro-processing product exporter based on agriculture, which is in consonance with nature, which improves the land quality, which reduces the use of water and leaves our nature better than what we've got, rather than leave arid lands behind. Friends, thank you very much for listening to me. It's been a great opportunity. I'm listening to everybody with great care, and I promise to listen to all else, because I think, as I said, this is a time to learn from each other, and we in India are eager to learn from all our neighbors, from their experiences, because each one's battle against the pandemic has many lessons for all of us. Thank you very much once more.
Thank you very much, Excellency Mr. Rajiv Kumar, for your many insightful ideas, including how to refurbish regional cooperation with very, very concrete ideas that you mentioned in the tourism, aviation sector, as well as this agroecology. Yes, this is also something new for me, but definitely, because then how you link agriculture also to mitigate climate change, as well as other ideas that you put forward. Again, thank you very much for your insightful ideas. May I now turn on to the next speaker, His Excellency Mr. Muhammad Aslam, Minister of National Planning, Housing and Infrastructure from Maldives. Excellency, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, honorable ministers, dear participants. It's a pleasure for me to take part in this forum, and very happy that UNESCAP have organized such a forum for us to discuss about how we come about with recoveries from the COVID pandemic, which has impacted the entire global community. And the more vulnerable and poor among us have been badly affected. As I've been hearing from the other speakers, that there are a lot of lessons that we have learned from this pandemic. Some lessons are good, some are bad, also have brought us all together, and our focus have been on, everybody has been focused on a single thing, and that is to save lives. To save lives, and our first and foremost attention was on saving lives. We all have sacrificed, many things to save lives. I am glad to report that Maldives have done an extremely good job in dealing with the pandemic. We have so far the first case of our community spreading happened on the 14th of April, and up till now we've had 2,517 cases, out of which 2,180 have recovered, and what's remaining as active cases is 324, and 13 deaths, unfortunately. It took us about 45 days to get into the steady growth of the viral spread. So we've started, and to start our note to start with was 2.1, 2.2, and then the effective R figure for now is 0.44. So we've done extremely well, and it did not happen just while we were sitting, and we did nothing. Of course, we did a lot of things. We went a long way where we did a lot of testing. We did a lot of contact tracing. Our contact tracing was done up to the secondary level of contacts, and then we've isolated everybody who was a positive case and also the primary contact of a positive case. We were fortunate to have, of course, tourism came to a standstill as soon as community spreading started. International travel stopped, so our resorts were there. Fortunately for us to isolate people into these facilities. So one of the best isolation and quarantine facilities we could claim that there is there and are there here in Maldives, and with all of that, as I said, we've prevented a lot of deaths. I mean, our projections were really high at the time when this all started, but then with the efforts we brought in, the lockdown measures, that did well. But of course, it have had a great impact on our economy. 80% of our economy depends on tourism, and then comes the fisheries sector, which also depends on the export to Europe and Southeast Asia. And with the travel stopping, with the tourists stop coming, the revenue to the country have been virtually zero. We don't have a big reserve, being a small island nation. So we've had, but we focused all our resources to combat this pandemic. We built a new hospital in Male in a matter of a month, 290 beds just for the COVID cases. 6 other facilities in the other regions we prevented. We were also quite lucky that the geographic nature of the nation is that the islands spread 186 islands. So all the cases, almost 99% of the cases have been restricted to the capital city. And we've only had cases found in only 3 other islands apart from the capital. So we're quite lucky in one way to have this geography. So often people when we talk about development in Maldives, people talk about population consolidation and bringing people to one single island where we have a larger community, and often it is justified in terms of economies of scale. So to have a certain size of economy running, you need to have a certain number of people, and therefore But what we found in the COVID situation was that it's good to be in isolated areas. It's good to be in separate islands. So we were naturally quite lucky. I mean, to be honest, this is not the first time we found ourselves to be in a lucky situation. The same thing happened even in tsunami. So I don't think anybody who's been thinking about Maldives, integrating and Maldives and development and bringing population, concentrating population, physically bringing them all to to fewer islands, and then creating an economy of scale and thinking in terms of dollars. That's not the right way of thinking. So that's one of the lessons we've definitely learned. But at the same time, we also learned over the years, Maldives, where a lot of functions have been centralized to the capital. Everything is distributed to the atolls from the capital. That's not the best thing to happen. We need to have regional centers, regional distribution, facilities where all sorts of good people don't have to. Not everybody will have to be depending on to come to the capital. Unfortunately, over the years, a very centralized system of development have been happening in Maldives. So we really need to come out of that and have decentralization as a focus that we should be working on. And then to do that, what we have been planning even before COVID was that Maldives should retain its island geographic nature while bringing people together in terms of connectivity. So in terms of a better infrastructure and a system for transportation between islands, and thereby we don't have to create everything on every island. Giving people the means to move around and make it a reliable and affordable system, people can then simply use that to have access to the services. So that was the focus that we had even before COVID, and after COVID, it has strengthen our belief that it is really the path we should be on. And a few other things that we learned from COVID was the virtual, the IT network and the internet is really a useful tool where for a long time we have been talking about, because of our isolated geographic nature of the islands, we've been talking about telemedicine. What we found during the COVID period was that the doctors were very receptive to this, patients were receptive to this. The doctors have started using, normal, mobile phones, smartphones, and for consultation purposes, and even online classes. So that the internet based doing things, we've learned lessons with that. I think we should, after the COVID, we should really move into that realm of doing things. We should invest in telemedicine, and we should invest in especially to reach out to the smaller island communities, even online teaching. So these are lessons that we've learned. I would also the government also brought in a lot of measures for people to ease the life of the people. We did brought in a moratorium of 6 months for all the loans from the banks and the lending facilities, and also brought a 40% reduction in the utility bills. Government also preserved a $162 million financial package for to help people in sustaining their businesses and those who went into unemployment. So these things are still going on, and obviously the pandemic is not over. I mean, we still keep finding cases, on average about 15 to 20 cases per day for the last 14 days. But we are on a steady growth now, so we can restart our economy now. But our economy is very much dependent on tourism. As I said earlier, 80% of the economy is dependent on tourism. So for our economy to start, functioning again, we need to have these people start traveling, and to have the people start traveling, it's unlikely that we're going to have Europeans traveling all the way to Asia, although it was a popular destination before COVID, anytime soon. But I would completely agree with Dr. Rajiv from India that we need to start a regional travel bubble within. We do get, in recent times, we've seen lots of Indian tourists come into the Maldives, and we need to do this with India, and perhaps, I mean, I know there are other countries in the Southeast Asian region even who can who from where we get our tourists. So we need to create that travel bubble within the region, and the same thing goes for a lot of South Indian states. Get like especially Kerala state in Trivandrum. Maldivians visit there for medical purposes. A whole lot of us go. 2 to 3 flights a day travel to India, just Maldivians going for medical purposes. The same thing happens between Maldives and Sri Lanka. So it's not just Indians coming to Maldives, it's a lot of Maldivians travel to India as well. So it's not a one-way thing. So a two-way thing can happen, but obviously, larger number of people will travel from India to Maldives because they have a larger population. But we need to create that contact, the travel bubble. I completely agree, and I'm also glad to hear that Dr. Rajiv talking about debt to GDP ratio. I mean, we cannot really be doing things business as usual. The lending agencies cannot really put the measures and they used to put on us, the criterias from that we used to evaluate, lending criteria for us. Things have to be eased, and then we need to borrow. We need to do things. We need to kickstart our economies. We need to start spending, and it's only the government who can actually borrow and start spending. So I would really like to see, unfortunately, the credit rating of every country globally have been brought down, and it affects us, mostly for developing countries, and then we now don't have the opportunity to borrow, and when we don't have the opportunity to borrow, we cannot implement the much needed infrastructure works, which actually gives a kickstart to the local economy. We cannot really be doing things. So really need to start looking at things in a different way. So this life after COVID, in every aspect, has to be looked at in a different way. Even lenders have to start looking at it in a different way. Credit rating has to be looked at in a different way. If it's simply, it's not just a health sector problem. So everybody will have to. So even they have, the financial sectors also needs to start looking at in a new normal situation. It cannot be just, the suffering cannot be just new normal, and the business happens as usual. So that really cannot happen. There's a whole lot we can really be doing with this together. I know, I mean, it's the start of things. We need to have a lot more of this dialogue, and I think if we start helping each other, among the neighbors first, then we can then expand it to other regions as well. I thank you very much for the opportunity, and I think it's a great opportunity for us to come together and start sharing our experiences and thoughts and how we want to move ahead. I would just one last thing, even lending from bilateral arrangements, often bilateral, that comes from Exim Bank and Buyers Credit comes with conditions where the lending country, it makes its condition that it's their goods, their contractors who will have to come and do the work in the borrowing country, the country who borrows. So such things needs to be eased, and we need to have our own contractors, our own people who can work on it, and the money is retained within the country. So I hope there's a whole lot we can talk about. I hope that we will have a good collaboration between the neighboring countries and do it. And thank you very much for the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Excellency. Thank you very much, for your insight. Due to time constraint, actually we have to end in like 10-15 minutes, but maybe we can extend a little bit more, to give the opportunity to speakers. The next one, Excellency Professor Pusparaj Kadel from Nepal, from the National Planning Commission. Excellency, the time is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam. Your Excellency, Under Secretary General of the United Nations and Executive Secretary of UNESCAP, Ms. Armida, Honorable Ministers from Afghanistan, Bangladesh, Bhutan, Maldives, Honorable Vice Chair of Niti Aayog India, Dr. Rajiv Kumar, Honorable Member, Planning Commission, Pakistan,
Secretary General SAARC Secretariat Kathmandu, Secretary General BIMSTEC Secretariat Dhaka, Director General Sustainable Development Council Sri Lanka, Director South and Southwest Asia Office UNESCAP New Delhi, Dr. Nagesh Kumar, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon and namaste. At the outset, I would like to express my pleasure for being invited as a panelist in this very important and timely webinar on the socio-economic impacts of COVID-19 and national strategies and sub-regional cooperation for building back better in South Asia. Before us, we have the critical challenges of bringing the situation to normalcy and working on building back better. Equally important is to turn the crisis into an opportunity to create more equal, sustainable, and resilient societies in South Asia. Nepal is experiencing its worst impact from COVID-19 right now. Until late May, Nepal was an outlier in South Asia and the world for its low number and slow rise of confirmed COVID-19 cases. The country went into a relatively strict lockdown on March 24, and cases remained under 1,000 until May 28. Once tens of thousands of migrant workers began to return home, the cases have now jumped over 16,000, and the daily number of confirmed cases and death toll are increasing. Nepal has actively participated in the regional initiatives taken at SAARC level to fight against the COVID-19 pandemic, including the participation of the Right Honorable Prime Minister at the SAARC leaders video conference in March. Since then, Nepal has also been actively engaging and contributing in subsequent SAARC level video conference meetings of our health ministers, health officials, and trade officials. Nepal has also committed Nepalese rupees 10 million to the SAARC COVID emergency fund established to fight against the pandemic on a regional level. As the current chair of SAARC, Nepal is committed to work with other member states to jointly combat the threat posed by the pandemic. Excellencies, Nepal's economic value chain system are broadly impacted with loss of informal jobs and has created economic hardship, especially for those who are vulnerable, dependent on daily wages, and likely to fall below the poverty line. The hard-hit sectors of the economy are health, tourism, employment, small and medium-term enterprises, remittance, informal sector, trade, among others. The pandemic has had intersectional and overlapping effects on individuals and communities, especially the lower income strata of people, women who are at risk of gender-based violence, and young students who face the digital divide and whose means of education seem halted. Not to mention the sick and elderly are equally prone to the health hazards of the COVID-19. Nepal has recently risen to a lower level middle income country with the GNI per capita rising to $1,097 in 2019. However, the economy may suffer further due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Nepal was well on its way to achieving the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development with an annual investment requirement estimated to be Nepalese 20-25 billion. The resource gap has been further widened due to the pandemic. But Nepal is doing something related to the minimizing the effect of pandemic. Nepal has been working hard to control the spread of coronavirus as well as to accelerate the socio-economic recovery by effectively mobilizing all tiers of government and other stakeholders in efficient and accountable manner who have worked extremely well in this regard. Nepal is focusing on its agricultural production as well as on the MSMEs and developing skills of its labor force. The most crucial areas to focus on appear to be improving digital literacy, broadband access, fintech services, and reskilling and upskilling the workforce. In Nepal, by the current year budget, different schemes have been started right now related to health, no hunger package, minimum wages, Prime Minister Employment Fund, internal tourism increasing packages, social protection system, children protection system, creating employment and reviving the tourism industry. Right now, we are having one study related to impact of COVID-19 on the economy. And after having getting the result of the study, we will have further packages to minimize the effect of the COVID-19. In order to mitigate the impact of the pandemic and to accelerate recovery in addressing the challenges faced, consistent dialogue and collaboration that is action-oriented is absolutely essential in South Asia and the world. Right now, considering all of the matters, regional cooperation in South Asia is vital to guard against COVID-19 vulnerabilities by strengthening social protection and livelihoods, introduce economic measures to save bankruptcies and create new sources of job creation through facilitation of regional trade and investment, introduce green, inclusive and gender-sensitive programs to address multiple and intersecting deprivations, of financial cooperation to needy people and the country for addressing the post-COVID-19 challenges, promote data and technology to address long-term challenges, energize the economy, speed up the development pace, and minimize the social gap, and have collective voice for access to the international market, finance, technology, and mitigation of climate change. Before I conclude, I take opportunity to thank UNESCAP, SSW, and Dr. Nagesh for this significant high-level virtual policy dialogue, and look forward to expediting cooperation and efforts to create more equal, sustainable, and resilient societies in South Asia. Thank you, and namaste. I wish you and your family are well in future also. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Excellency Professor Puspa Rajkadel, for again your insight as well as information regarding impact of COVID-19 to Nepal and the policy responses have been taken, yes, so far. May I now turn to the next speaker, is Her Excellency Dr. Shabnum Surfraz, Member of Planning Commission of Pakistan. So the time is yours, Excellency. Over to you. Excellency, I think you have to unmute your microphone. We cannot hear your voice.
I hope you can hear me now.
Yes. Yeah, now it's good. Now it's good. Thank you.
Thank you. His Excellency Secretary General SAARC and BIMSTEC Secretariat, His Excellency Ms. Armida, Under Secretary General of the United Nations and Executive Secretary of UNESCAP, Dr. Nagesh Kumar, ministers and high-level representatives from each of the South Asian states, it's my great honor and privilege to join you all at this very important high-level policy dialogue arranged by UNESCAP. As of today, our cases in Pakistan stand at 240,848. We have a mortality rate of 2%, and our total deaths are less than 5,000, and they are at 4,983. Our recovery rate has luckily been 96.68%, and 59.9% of our confirmed cases have recovered to date. The number of testing positive in Pakistan has declined from 15.7% from the peak of 22.3% that we experienced on June 4th, 2020. A recent study documents Pakistan transmission rate as the lowest in the region. However, we fully recognize that there is no time to relax. In Pakistan, we undertook a comprehensive socioeconomic impact analysis with support of UN partners in March 2020 when we had less than 2,000 cases. This entailed analysis of the risks to women, economic security and well-being during economic crisis, the demand and supply of paid and unpaid labor, the conditions of employment and government policy settings, as well as the fiscal space in the time of turmoil. The government of Pakistan has set 3 goals for itself: saving lives, which involves taking initiatives around suppressing the transmission and strengthening the resilience of health systems; saving livelihoods, addressing the differential impacts and expanding the scope and reach of social protection; salvaging the economy is our 3rd goal, which is around reorienting to evolving landscape and exploiting favorable externalities. The financial support which was required for a comprehensive emergency preparedness and response program, which was built on the basis of this socioeconomic impact analysis, was swiftly provided. We had extensive support from multilaterals and bilaterals, and we approved a $613 million Pakistan National Emergency Preparedness and Response Plan in March, supported by the World Bank, ADB, Asian Development Bank, and AFT. Another $750 million were awarded for an active response and expenditure program for COVID-19. Our national budgets for the social sector were enhanced by 21%, and there has been dedicated another $70 billion for COVID-19 responsive and interventions which we are designing on. $371 million was given to health in the very beginning. For the educational disruption, a national action plan for education by the name of Aspire was drafted and is into the execution, usually supported by World Bank. And the social protection component of the at a cost of $237 million is being executed by the largest state-funded cash transfer program, SARS, which targets women also in several ways. The Prime Minister's Green Economic Stimulus is another very vital initiative. The economy of government of Pakistan was making a positive recovery in the pre-COVID period. In face of COVID, there have been multiple fiscal and financial interventions which have been instituted. This includes relief for electricity consumers, waiving of taxes and duties, reduction in tariff rates, payment of principal on loan obligations being deferred for 1 year, concessionary loans being provided and relaxing the credit requirements. New refinancing facilities have been introduced. There are indeed some helpful externalities that provide opportunity to reorient our priorities. Industry, agriculture, and services are expected to regain vigor much faster. The agriculture sector is relatively resilient in the face of the epidemic, and the sector is critical from the standpoint of food security and rural economy. New business opportunities have also emerged. ICT-based services are on the rise. There's surge in digital provision of medical, health, and advisory services. These new areas are being carefully nurtured together with identifying and nurturing emerging business opportunities. South Asia, which comprises predominantly of low-middle income countries, is already strewn with gaps in public health infrastructure, basic sanitation facilities, and inequitable access to broadband, which is very critical at this point in time. Already elevated levels of fiscal deficits and public debt resulting in governments of the South Asian countries are finding themselves having limited fiscal space to mount the major relief and stimulus packages which are needed to mitigate the socioeconomic impacts. Even much before the pandemic, our progress on SDGs has been off track, and I speak on behalf of the entire region when I say this. The region is one of the most populous, and we are majorly less developed in the world. The income losses associated with the pandemic are wreaking havoc with the livelihoods and well-being of the population. International trade is collapsing, informal sectors is crippled, currency devaluations, declining remittances, there's liquidity crunch, supply chain disruptions, labor shortages, and demand collapses, which has affected us disproportionately, as we've heard from our regional representatives. Being the only women in the panel, I want to voice on the gender gap, which is widening at an exponential rate. Considering the income loss, unpaid work, burden predominant employment in informal sector and caregiving. In Pakistan, we have undertaken this socioeconomic assessment to take an informed stock of the upcoming situation, identifying the existing vulnerable population clusters and those on the brink of being included in this group in order to design responsive reforms. But we also want to look at this as an opportunity to set up systems better than they were pre-COVID-19, to work on preparedness, decarbonizing economies, digital connectivity, and we want to do this in partnership with the region, to finance cross-border power trading infrastructure, regulatory harmonization, promotion of private sector participation, and cross-learning from best practices expand on our mutual large renewable energy potential and pursue the possibility for an integrated regional power grid, revitalizes existing partnerships to catalyze the larger infrastructure projects. This certainly calls for knowledge brokering. What are other countries in the region doing to ensure continuity of essential health services in the wake of COVID-19? Do we as a region get together to remove tariffs on medical devices, protective gears, disinfectants, vaccines, critical medicines? We launched the largest emergency cash support under our social welfare program, SARS, reaching out to 14 million vulnerable families. What else could we have done to protect our people's health and livelihoods and salvage the economy? More important, what do we do now? What kind of policy structure? What kind of labor workforce and employment generation? How do we strengthen regional institutions, improve regional infrastructure and connectivity? This region has achieved significant progress through cooperation in the power sector, and that experience can be applied to special priority areas such as health, education, food security, even critical logistics, and the tourism that a lot of us talked about. It would be disservice to our people, I feel, if we do not plan together for preparedness and response, for digital education and skill building solutions. There are discussions around health diplomacy. It is ambit need to be broadened now to become public policy diplomacy, with a huge responsibility on the leadership in the region to lead with a vision built on principles of social cohesion and one world, of the multi-sectoral, technical, social, and economic cooperation beyond historical conflicts. There is need for strong regional commitment. It may not be an umbrella structure and can be sector-specific even. SAARC or BIMSTEC or One Belt, One Road, whatever works and delivers socio-economic alignment. It is time, we strongly feel, for bold new movements for regional uplift that is sustainable and just. COVID-19 has challenged us all and the norms that we have been accustomed to. It has made us rethink our existing paradigm. We reorient our development priorities, redesign our sectoral strategies. It needs a quantum leap in ICT. There is a need to look at regional and global best practices and how the world is evolving. The government of Pakistan looks forward to deepening regional cooperation as we move forward and convert this adversity into an opportunity. We duly acknowledge the vital role being played by UNESCAP in this context and look forward to working together. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Her Excellency Dr. Sabtun Surfraz, for again several of the insights are very forward-looking and the potentials to scale up further regional collaboration. May I now turn to the last but not the least speaker, His Excellency Dr. Sugat Yalegama from the Sustainable Development Council of Sri Lanka. So the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Chi Amida, and also the Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. So let me first of all thank the SCAP for taking the initiative to publish the report on COVID-19 and South Asia, which provides a good analysis of the situation in South Asia and also the strategies for resilient recovery from COVID-19 pandemic. So it highlights the fact that COVID-19 has caused more economic issues than even health issues in the region, with important sectors such as tourism and MSMEs affecting adversely from the pandemic and forecast economic recessions. I also thank the I thought thank you for inviting us to participate in this policy dialogue. The points on harnessing new opportunities through reskilling of the workforce and building back through people-centered and sustainable stimulus packages are well taken. And financial cooperation is especially needed for addressing the post-COVID-19 challenges, given the limited fiscal space of some member countries, including Sri Lanka. So in your report, I wish if you can update the figure 21 in 2012 data, with 2012 data for Sri Lanka, the proportion of people living in slums was only 0.8% of urban population in 2012, even though it was 25% in 1990. That's a positive development, but I think but we are facing a lot of challenges with COVID. So Sri Lanka has been quite successful in containing the first wave of COVID-19 outbreak, though through rapidly scaled up response, including lockdowns, dedicated quarantine centers, social distancing measures, and prompt detecting and quarantine of infected persons associated with the support of police and military. So by this, Sri Lanka could manage the situation before going to community transmission stage. So we have only about 2,100 patients so far. So moreover, Sri Lanka records a very low death rate of 0.5% and a high recovery rate of 94%. Right now, we have only about 100 active cases, and majority of them are returnees from abroad. So curfew has been lifted, schools and universities have started opening, and life is returning to normal day by day while following the health guidelines. Hence, I wish to highlight a few points from Sri Lanka's approach to containing COVID-19 pandemic. So Sri Lanka closely monitored pandemic's movement right after the first case appeared in the nation, tracking any potential COVID-19 suspects. The health staff, with the support of state intelligence, hunted for the first contacts as soon as a case was detected and directed them to dedicated quarantine centers. The Health Ministry developed and established an information system for surveillance of COVID-19 to gather information on high-risk patients, high-risk passengers entering the country from at-risk countries for active COVID-19 surveillance. This surveillance system captures demographics, immigration, the systems of disease, and the possible contacts of all ports of entry for local public health officers based on their geographic area. So this system, this surveillance system, is quite sophisticated in that respect. So we could really track the cases. So massive awareness raising campaign was launched using the radio, TV, and even private phones and hotlines, and important numbers were shared widely. The government provided infrastructure, the instructions for selected public activities, work settings, and general guidance for public on COVID-19 prevention. The clinical practice guidelines were developed and shared with healthcare providers so that we didn't have the health professionals contacting coronavirus. And home delivery of essential goods was arranged to avoid gathering of crowd. And online education was introduced. Right now, all arriving passengers have to undergo a 14-day mandatory quarantine period at a designated quarantine center. However, the accelerating progress towards achieving 2030 agenda within the next decade will depend mostly on our socio-economic resilience. So economic revival is an urgent priority right now in Sri Lanka. The government has granted financial relief to over 6 million affected families and vulnerable people, covering all affected groups in the country. A COVID-19 healthcare and social security fund has been set up to strengthen the mitigation activities to control the COVID-19 spread and social welfare programs. The government has devised an economic revival strategy that identifies new opportunities and challenges to be implemented with a new set of guidelines, such as maintaining businesses and also offices with minimum staff, work from home, and continuation of essential services and agriculture, while maintaining the social distancing requirements. Now, Sri Lanka has utilized 3 types of policies to address COVID-19 pandemic and its effects. Firstly, the border control and health sector policies. Secondly, the fiscal policies. And thirdly, the monetary and financial sector measures, including capital reform management. Now, the border control and health sector policies attempt to contain the spread of pandemic, while the other policies adopted by the government and the central bank seek to provide relief to businesses and also individuals affected by the pandemic and address emerging macroeconomic concerns. In relation to monetary measures, the Central Bank of Sri Lanka thus far has reduced the key policy interest rates, namely the standing deposit facility rate and the standing lending facility rate, by 100 basis points across 3 cuts, 2 of which were undertaken during the emergency reviews in the months of March and April 2020. In addition, financial institutions have been requested to reschedule the non-performing loans. To facilitate these concessions, lower capital conservation buffer requirements have been announced, in addition to providing liquidity at reduced interest rates. The government introduced the Saubhagya COVID-19 Renaissance Facility, which provides working capital for adversely affected businesses to revive their activities. A new comprehensive rural credit scheme was introduced to provide loans to farmers at concession rates. Measures have also been taken by the Central Bank of Sri Lanka to provide flexibility to non-bank financial institutions to support businesses and individuals affected by outbreak of coronavirus and low cost credit to businesses. So with respect to SDGs, in fact, we observe many of the impacts on SDG 1 and 8, so they are the most affected. So the goal 1 for no poverty. So poverty could reduce due to job losses and economic lockdowns. In Sri Lanka, up to 60% of unemployed per person or 40% are not going for work. And it has disproportionate impact on vulnerable groups, with approximately 60% of those employed being engaged in the informal sector, an estimated 1.9 million being daily wage earners. A large number of households are likely to be in the precarious position. Several small and medium businesses are on the verge of being winding up. Elderly people are living just above the poverty line are highly vulnerable, and they could rip back to the low-income group. Then the online education is becoming popular in Sri Lanka. However, this could increase inequalities as the accessibility is low or near zero for poor families. Lack of basic ICT skills also a major barrier to successfully implement online education. Regional and global cooperation is essential to develop digital connectivity and electronic platforms in the education sector. On the goal 8, SDG 8, the weakening of key trading partners and disturbances to supply chain are likely affect adversely on the import and future export volumes of the country and export earnings. The World Bank has downgraded Sri Lanka from an upper middle income country to a lower middle income country one after it recorded. Because our GDP per capita was recorded as US dollars 4,020, so which is less than 4,060 that was recorded in the last year. So with 4,060 we were in the upper middle income range. Now we have been put back to lower middle income range. So overcoming all these challenges, so these are all challenges, and overcoming all these challenges cannot be achieved alone by any country, and mutual help is essential. So hence there is increased need to enhance cooperation in many sectors, including tourism. Now tourism sector, now we have lost jobs, about 1 million jobs in Sri Lanka. So there are huge economic impacts. This is really quite similar to many other countries, many other presentations I listened to in this policy dialogue. And also business development. In the tourism and business development sectors, I think ESCAP can play an important role by facilitating this regional cooperation to get these countries, these member states, out of this economic embroiled. We are really economic grip. We have to get rid of these economic issues. And I think SACEP and the SAC and also the ESCAP has a huge role in cooperating, and I believe the ESCAP will play it. Of course, ESCAP has been very supportive to Sri Lanka throughout, and into many other countries as well, I know. And so we hope to continue this dialogue and also to help mutually in this exercise. So again, I wish to thank you for organizing this very important timely dialogue and inviting us to participate. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Dr. Sugath Yalegama from Sustainable Development Council Sri Lanka. Excellencies, dear colleagues, participants, I have to apologize because due to we have a time, already 20-25 minutes, past the time allocated for our the policy dialogue here. So again, can I ask Nagesh to just briefly, sort of summarize, and then I'll wrap up the whole session before I close the session. Over to you, Nagesh.
Thank you, Ibu Armida. I think we have heard a number of very important insights and suggestions for taking the agenda of regional cooperation forward. There are also a number of comments and questions in the chat box, which we have got on the YouTube channel. But as you mentioned, the time we have run out. So what we will do is to go offline and respond to them who have come with the questions. And if there are some specific questions directed to one of our distinguished speakers, then we will get in touch and get the responses from them. I think it's time that we say thank you to everyone and move on. Over to you, Ibu.
Yeah. Again, thank you very much, Nagesh. May I wrap up by sort of again, thank you again for the very, very rich, very rich inputs, lessons learned that almost impossible, for me to quickly, nicely summarize it. But if I may, I would like to pick three big points from the discussion. First is lessons learned from the immediate response. I think all countries, have provided immediate response in the health care, health provision, how to strengthen while at the same time effectively addressing the most immediate needs of the health response. Second, again, many of speakers stress the importance of how to keep the SMEs because they are the backbone of the economy. They are where the jobs are, and they are the lifeline of all the economies. The vulnerable group, which is again very important to prioritize on. Second is on the fiscal stimulus. Again, all this, all this needs to be supported through fiscal stimulus. Maybe not all countries are in the same situation. Some have the fiscal space there, so they have this more flexibility, but some countries may be not, So therefore, but this is for all countries, very important also to start or to try to develop alternative sources of revenue. Again, if I may, just to repeat, Dr. Rajiv Kumar gave quite interesting ideas on this asset monetization, and several other ideas, and also the importance of connectivity, supply chain, as well as the agricultural sector. Third is the need of out-of-the-box policy of response. It's needed, the conventional or regular for the immediate response. We already understand and learn a lot of that, but also very important how government, in this case, can come up also with out-of-the-box policy response, because the situation is extraordinary, So we need also, one or two initiative that is considered to be out of the box, including, from regulatory, maybe just change the regulation, or on how to push, on this, all the support and so on, and to jumpstart, not only to mitigate, the impact on certain sector and so on, but also how to jumpstart a particular sector of activity, especially those, that are the backbone again of the economy, such as tourism, travel, and certain sector and so on, So therefore, then we come to the third cluster, if I may say, the importance of sub-regional regional cooperation. Yeah, because with this, then we can push it forward. Yeah, the initiative. No solutions, or how do you say it? Yeah, not all solutions. Yeah, can be developed by our own, by each country itself. Yeah, you need. Yeah, at the end of the day, you need to reach out. You need to collaborate. Yeah, so this is the value of sub-regional regional cooperation, including in the economic areas, such as how to jumpstart the economy. Or if the economy relies on tourism, then you need to work together. Yeah, this idea of travel bubble that is floating. Yeah, around that several countries already started with this out of the box initiative. Likewise, the cross-border flow of goods. Yeah, in which you need cooperation of it from custom, from this health quarantine, standardization, and so on and so forth. So in this regard, may I, on behalf of ESCAP, also to encourage countries to also, if already in the process, to ratify the cross-border paperless trade, which will facilitate this cross-border trade and so on. Because again, going forward, very important, this a trade and so on, how to be more and more contactless. So this agreement will facilitate this kind of trade, And one or two other example that can be, further through regional cooperation is the lessons learned, how to respond, not only how to respond better to crisis, but how to prepare better. Let's say for the next pandemic or crisis. Again, one or two speakers alluded earlier the importance of other countries that experienced SARS, for example, and now they are much better prepared. And we hope also, this COVID-19 pandemic, although it is very painful, but it hopefully can serve as also lessons learned, to better prepare all of us for the next, hopefully not, but for the next pandemic and crisis. So again, Excellencies, distinguished colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, friends, I would like to sincerely thank and appreciate for all your excellent contribution. We look forward to work closer with all of you to advance several of these initiatives and ideas, especially by forging closer regional cooperation. And certainly ESCAP, together with you and family, stand ready to collaborate closer with you. So with that, I close the high-level policy dialogue again with sincere thanks and hope to touch base again with you soon. Thank you very much, and a very good evening to all of you. Thank you, Excellency. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Bye. Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone, for joining, and hope to see you soon sometime. Thank you. Bye-bye.